Yeah, so hopefully this is the event that you'd like to be in today. I'm just going to move you so that you're out of my way, so I won't be able to see you at the moment. So yeah, we've done the housekeeping. Just to say, run through for today's session, I'm going to be sharing some practical tips for events. We'll then have short breakout rooms, and we can sort of share ideas that we have ourselves with each other. Darren's going to be sharing some other planet-friendly activities that you can kind of integrate into different events. And yeah, we'll have an open space at the end. So we should be finishing up before 1:30. Depending on how chatty we all are today, we might finish before that, but we'll see how we go. So just to introduce us quickly, if you don't know us, I can see some familiar faces already, so I know you do, but if you don't, so we're Eden Project Communities. We are the outreach arm of the Eden Project, so we are linked with the Eden Project down in Cornwall. This is a sign that is outside the Eden Project, so yeah, we're ordinary people trying to change the world. So Eden Communities is, we support a network of community movers and shakers to help make where you live even better. We think to tackle the greatest issues facing us, we need strong and resilient communities. And we think that we're better equipped to face those challenges when we do them together. So that's including climate change, which is why we thought we would cover this topic today, about thinking about doing events in a more climate friendly way. And yeah, Eden Communities, we also aim to connect people and communities, and yeah, encourage people, everyday people, to make positive change where they live. One of the main ways we do this is with the Big Lunch. So you can see there our partners supporting us this year. If you don't know about the Big Lunch, it's all about connecting people where they live. It happens on the first weekend of June every year, and it gives people permission to get to know their neighbours. This year's Big Lunch is actually on World Environment Day, so it feels like a really good opportunity to think about how we're running our Big Lunches and our events, or even using that as a theme. So yeah, great that you're part of this call today. And as you can see on the slide, last year 9.3 million people joined in across the UK, and that was across events large and small. So the big in the Big Lunch is actually about everybody taking part together. It's not about the size of the event. And while it is about, you can see from that picture, it's friendship, it's food, it's fun, having a get together with neighbours can have a real impact, which I'll go on to my stats slide. So yeah, from last year, you can see that from these stats, yeah, 77% of attendees told them it's just what they needed. Over 6 million people said that it helped them feel less lonely. 18 million new friendships were made. Just crazy, amazing stats. So have a look at those. And yeah, the fact that £7.4 million was raised. And this is all from a few hours of people getting together in their communities on one day. So just imagine what can happen if we kind of keep up that community spirit. Oh yeah, and just to mention, last year we also set up the month of community, and we're running that again this year. So this is all about, so all of these organisations here, I think you can probably see my cursor, all of these things happen in June, and they're just extra opportunities for people to connect with each other, to organise events, to support causes that you care about, potentially raise money for them, or just to say thank you. So across June last year, 15 million people took part. And as I said again, this year, World Environment Day is part of the month of community on the 5th of June. So just another opportunity to do things and get together, just all these excuses. So back to today. The Big Lunch is what we're most involved with, so I will be referencing it a lot, but these tips can definitely work for all sorts of events. So if you've got an event plan that is a Big Lunch or isn't a Big Lunch, just let us know about it in the chat. It'd be really great to see what people have got planned, and then we can chat a bit more about that later. So I will crack on. So to start with, just a few tips to get going. Whatever your event looks like, you'll probably need to promote it and get people to come along to it. So why not do like these people did and use some scraps of paper to get kids involved. Yeah, you can get kids involved in writing this as well. So you don't need to print things out, you don't need to use shiny new paper, you can do something quite rough and ready and draft, and it looks really nice. If you do want to invite people, we do have big lunch invitations and posters available, and we work quite hard on making those. They're from the papers from FSC sourced paper. They're printed using solar energy with vegetable based ink, so they are as good as you can get when it comes to printing stuff out. So you're welcome to have some of those if you'd like them. But the other thing is to say, actually, in the world we're in now, you may not even want to share anything physical and save the paper entirely. You could share invitations and promote things online on WhatsApp or through Facebook groups, and just, yeah, save on the paper entirely. Also, if you are thinking about doing an event where you have a theme that is planet friendly, you can mention that on the invitations, but I'll come back to that in a minute later on. So if you're running an event, you want it to look gorgeous. If you're going to decorate your space, just be really creative with your decorations. Raid your recycling bin, use old clothes, old t-shirts, and get online. Like, our website has got absolutely loads of tips and ideas on how to upcycle and reuse things to make decorations. So a few examples you've got in front of you here. You can make bunting out of old clothes or cardboard boxes that you can colour in. The kids can get painting. I think I've seen links before about people who make bunting out of plastic bags. I think Darren's done that before. So you like iron them together. So there's loads of ways to do it, and they can make a difference to a space. You can make pom-poms or tassels. So you can make those out of paper or wool or little scraps of fabric like that picture there. And it just, yeah, just that little scraps of fabric look amazing. Just have just to decorate a space. Paper chains is another way to do it. So you can use an old magazine and make those like paper links, or you can use some chalk and make some temporary street art if you've got an event outside, or if you've got an outside space, and obviously it just washes away when the rain comes. If you're thinking about doing like having a tablecloth during your event, you could use an old curtain or old bed sheets. You can avoid having those throwaway paper ones. So yeah, lots of just creative ideas about where to source things from, I guess. And it's just a nice way to bring people together as well, because you can get creating these in advance. I will share loads of links. We've got loads of links on our website of sort of crafting and upcycling. So I will share those in the follow-up for anyone who's interested. Oh yeah, and going on from decorations, like try natural decorations. So you could use homegrown flowers from your garden or herbs, and they smell amazing. Or you could just make sure you buy British, and that would be really much more planet friendly than having imported flowers brought in. You can use old jam jars or tins to pop them in. Yeah, just again, be really creative. Think about twigs or petals or leaves that you can use to decorate a space. And the small picture there is, I'm hoping you can see that all right. Somebody told me before that they used a hole punch, and they had dried leaves and used it as table confetti, which I thought was fantastic, because I hate those tiny little bits of plastic table confetti, because they just get everywhere, don't they? And they're just single use, so we don't like those. But I just love the idea of having like naturally made ones. So yeah, if you're doing an event, oh, that's my doorbell. Hopefully my other half will answer it. Classic thing of home working. So if you are doing an event outside, you can hope for the sun and then prepare for any rain. In that picture, those kids are having fun in the rain. But the tip really is about inside venues. So if you are doing an event inside, find a room that's full of natural daylight. Like this one here, it had absolutely loads of windows. Hello, dog. And yeah, so if you've got loads of natural daylight, you can say putting your lights on, and actually if it's a sunny day, you won't need to put the heating on or anything like that. So again, saving energy, being really planet positive. There's something as well around with COVID at the moment, making people feel comfortable. Actually, a venue with lots of windows, you could open them up, and people might be more COVID friendly. Another tip for an event to be planet friendly, try to borrow things. Most of the things you need for an event will be on your doorstep, whether that's borrowing it from neighbours or even from a local school or a community centre. I know people have borrowed tables and chairs and plates and all sorts from local schools before, because they're not used quite often on weekends and in evenings. But yeah, the other thing is that many communities now have tool libraries or libraries of things. So you can borrow what you need for your event. So this is a screen grab of a website called Benthig, which is the library of things that covers South Wales at the moment. So this is my local one, and they've got things like, yeah, things for your kitchen, for gardening, cleaning, DIY. But actually for events and community events, you might find that a gazebo would be something you could borrow, or a barbecue or outside games. So just have a look, see what they've got, and they're usually really, really affordable or free sometimes. And yeah, you might be able to borrow from neighbours as well. So just think about where to get things and try not to go out and buy things if you don't need to. Yeah, and if your event is in the evening or goes into the night, like this lunar lunch does, think about how to light or how to heat your area. So rather than having those outside heaters that kind of heat the outside air, don't they? Which are probably not the most planet friendly, using up that energy. So yeah, think about having blankets instead of heaters. Think about having solar powered LED fairy lights, or those little candle lights like they have in this event, and just make sure if they're solar powered to charge them up during the day. Another tip for your event is how people are going to get there. So if it's not outside your house, if it's in a venue that's a bit further away, think about how you use it yourself and how other people can travel there. So can you walk or cycle or catch a bus? Can other people do that? Is it accessible? If you've got stuff to take, like these slides, go for the classic granny trolley. I don't know what else to call that. You say trolley or shopping trolley, you think of the ones in the shops. So those fantastic trolleys are great. Or even someone here has a cargo bike. So there's ways to get around without having to take a car everywhere. So, but it could be a really nice theme or a challenge as well, to challenge people to arrive in different ways. So that's another way you could make your events planet friendly. I appreciate I'm like whistling through these. Hopefully there's some tips that are useful for you. So the next few tips are about food. So we're a big fan of bringing people together over food. If you are planning an event that doesn't have food, maybe think about adding it, because you'll probably get more people turning up. Yeah, some of these are really obvious, but actually get everyone to bring their own cups, plates and cutlery. Depending on your location or the situation of your event, you might want to take kind of plastic picnic ones, reusable ones, or actually a classic dinner plate and a knife and fork might work, and people can bring their own. And then you can just wash them up, and if you're catering an event, you can get everyone else to help washing them up. But it just saves that kind of throwaway paper or plastic situation. Nobody wants a sack full of paper plates at the end of their event. I ran a big lunch a few years ago on my street, and well, I think it was the first one I did. I actually ended up claiming about 3 forks. I took 3 forks home with me just because nobody had a few people had left them, and I was like, well, are these anyone's forks? So that was a plus for me, because forks always seem to go missing, don't they? They just seem to disappear. But anyway, I don't advise stealing other people's cutlery. So one of the big things around food and events is trying not to waste food. So there's something around planning food in advance. So try not to overbuy food. If with a big lunch, quite often you're bringing stuff and everybody's sharing. So don't worry about providing everything yourself. I've definitely fallen into that trap before. I was like, but I have to make sure there's enough cookies for everyone. But you just don't have to. People will bring stuff. And if you are catering or doing a barbecue or something like that, you can try and work out numbers beforehand and get people to RSVP. Another thing you could do to try and save wasting food is see what food you've already got in your cupboards. So if you've got something that you haven't used, or you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if anybody's going to want that, actually, there's some really nice store cupboards, essentials, pasta salads, potato salads, that sort of thing, that you could whip up rather than buying any more. There's also a tip around taking home anything that is left over. So try not to waste anything at the end of the day. So the best tip someone said to me about this was actually, whatever you take home with you. Make sure everyone, if you bring a dish, you're going to want your dish home to take home anyway. So just make sure you take that content home with you as well, rather than any one organizer being stuck with all of the leftovers. So it depends on your view. That might be a good thing for you if you're the organizer. It is for me. So a really good tip as well for this, and this is relevant for all events, if not life in general, try not to overfill your plate. So if you think about it, anything that's on your plate and isn't eaten will probably go straight in the bin. But anything that you don't put on your plate and isn't eaten will probably get taken home as a leftover. So it's just a really small tip, but actually it can make a difference to how much food could be wasted. And one more tip is, not to open everything at once. So at an event that I held, someone brought a chocolate cake and opened it, but then they had to leave early. So everyone was being so polite. Nobody ate the chocolate cake, but because it was open, we couldn't. We thought, oh, if it wasn't open, we could have sent it to a food bank or given it to a neighbour as a present. Luckily, we did manage to slice it up and send everyone home with some cake. Chocolate cake will never be wasted around me. But Tupperware is your best friend here as well. You can see those people there. Everything can come in Tupperware, and take some Tupperware with you. You can take things home. Just a few more tips on food. So you could try and cut down on the amount of meat or dairy you've got on an event. So you can try and make the kind of theme of the event could be to have a dairy-free event or a vegan event. And you can ask people to bring like local and in-season food, which at this time of year, going into spring and summer, it's a really great time of year for that in-season fruit and vegetables. So yeah, you could have it as a theme, or even a plastic-free theme. It's really nice. So I know somebody who did someone in Chepstow who did a plastic-free big lunch. And I think it was a single-use plastic. So everybody who, I think you're allowed to bring containers of plastic, but nothing single-use, nothing throwaway. And again, that's a really nice way to link if you're doing something on the 5th of June, really nice way to link to Environment Day. With this, it's really mindful around food to try and keep it inclusive, because you want it to be open for everyone. But actually, if there's somebody with a dairy intolerance, having a dairy-free event is actually a really nice way to bring those people together and make people aware of that, and also to be planet friendly. So there's nice creative ways of thinking about how to encourage planet friendly food. You could have, so rather than having bottled water, get some jugs, whether they're plastic or glass, fill them up with water, put some fruit in them, and then that saves any, you can put like lemon, mint, cucumber, or even have jugs of Pimm's, but that just sort of saves on people bringing bottled drinks, which are also quite heavy to carry if people are coming to an event. Oh, so this is really rock and roll. Sort out your bins. So take recycling bags, take food waste bags or bins, depending on what you've got in your area and what your local authority collects. It's worth checking with them probably. But yeah, do it in advance so you don't have to faff on the day. Yeah, you might have, if you don't have a local authority, if your council doesn't compost for you, you might have a neighbour who might be willing to take some stuff to compost as well. And if you're wondering why this photo, I wasn't going to put a picture of bins on the slide. So this is actually my big lunch. I think it must be 2019, just before the pandemic. And this photo is to do, don't learn from my lessons, don't do what I did. Keep your bins clearly marked. Can't see any bins in that photo. That is because I tied them up underneath the table, which is thoroughly unhelpful because I spent the whole, like a few hours, the whole day I just spent going, oh yeah, the bin's under there. Oh yeah, the bin's under there. And people trying to reach through. So yes, make sure you've got the bins, try to keep them obvious and clearly marked. And also sometimes it's a nice opportunity to learn from each other about what is recyclable or reusable in your area. So on that day, I actually learned that my local authority recycles foil, which I didn't know before. So as long as it's clean, they can recycle foil. So I've been doing that for the last few years as well, which is great. Again, another really, really simple thing, but a chance to chat about things like that and just encourage people to be planet friendly. Okay, a few things from me before I finish. So yeah, I've been trying to share some tips. Some of them are really obvious, some of them you may not have thought of before, but yeah, on how to be planet friendly for a community event. But I've got a few little bugbears of things that I think that I would suggest you try to avoid. So they're sometimes quite small and often overlooked, but they're hopefully useful to think about. So as a rule of thumb, try and avoid anything single use or disposable. So yeah, avoid the plastic or paper plates like I've mentioned before. But also this event here looks lovely, it looks like a fantastic, it's obviously a Jubilee event, red, white and blue everywhere. Like, why would I have an issue with that? Balloons. Oh, I hate to say it, balloons are such a part of parties, but they are single use, they're plastic. If they've got helium in them, they can float off and go and pollute the countryside. So they aren't the best thing. And the way I mentioned earlier, there's so many other ways that you can make decorations without using balloons. So yeah, just try and be creative and think outside the box. Another thing alongside that is party poppers. So they will make a mess, and quite often the tiny bits that come out of them get left behind and litter. So again, try and think about those confetti options rather than those. I think it was Tracy that told me this actually, that her bugbear was pots of bubbles, because you get those pots of bubbles that kids absolutely love, but they actually, you've got a tiny bit of liquid in them and you use them once and they get chucked away. So my tip here, as you can see from this photo, is to make a really big batch. So you can quite easily use washing up liquid and tap water and a bucket and make a really big batch of bubble liquid solution, and then you can get some twigs and some string and make giant bubbles and stick out of sticks. So the kids absolutely love doing that. They love playing with it and they're fantastic to run after and pop. So yeah, just think about doing stuff like that rather than those tiny little pots. And again, I've mentioned this previously, but yeah, try to avoid foil and cling film, things that are only going to get used once. If you could use Tupperware instead, that would be great. So I think that was my whistling through. So I will stop sharing now, and then we'll pop into some breakout rooms. I appreciate I've just like absolutely thrown loads of information at you. But yes, next we will pop into some breakout rooms quickly, which I think Tracy's going to set up for us. Thank you, Tracy. And yeah, just to tell us a little bit about, tell each other about what kind of stuff you've done before, or if you liked any of those tips, which ones you would take up, and yeah, what else you'd find useful. If you've got any ideas you want to share, I can see things have come through the chat already, but anything else you can share with us later on as well. Great, over to you, Darren.
Lovely, thank you. No, I had a lovely chat with Herman, Sandy and Prev in the breakout rooms, and found out that Prev's in my region, so we'll be catching up in a bit. But yeah, I'm just going to go over a few things that you can do before, during and after your big lunch. So first up, litter picking is a really great way to spruce up your streets, parks and towns, just bring people together in readiness for a big lunch. So not only does that restore pride of place where you live, but you can very quickly turn an unsightly spot into a wilderness of nature. I think that regular show of strength is just often enough to deter littering, but it also does inspire others to follow suit and sets an example. And apparently litter picking is a new rock and roll, so I guess it's that punk attitude of don't wait for other people to do something for you, just get out there and do it yourself, whether you've got a Mohican haircut or not. There's an example here. This is Hale's Own Beautiful. They're a very successful local litter picking group close to me, which was formed in January 2020 by a group of volunteers, and that has more than 200 members who regularly meet up and clear litter across the town. And in doing that, they found that they forged really wonderful friendships and gained a real community buzz by coming together regularly, which is fantastic news to hear. So next slide, please, Larry. And next up, we've already touched on this, or Larry's already touched on creating eco-friendly decorations, and that's a great way to come together and celebrate in the run-up to a big lunch, and doesn't have to cost the earth, literally. So one of the best things about the pandemic is that I guess it's made us more self-sufficient, and that make do amend attitude's really kind of taken off again, I think, which has made us consider our impact on the environment a bit more, and particularly as we were accessing and enjoying parks and gardens much more than we did before. So next slide, please, Larry. Another thing you can do before the big lunch is, right, so it's Big Lunch is partnered with Food for Life Get-Togethers program by the Soil Association, and that's all about bringing different generations together through growing, cooking and eating. And during Plant Share Month, which is between April 20th and May, so that's now, we're encouraging people to plant and share food together in preparation for the big lunch or big Jubilee lunch. And that said, it's fast approaching, so I'd recommend growing microgreens, which are really simple to grow. They can be harvested in, say, a week to 10 days after the seed leaves have developed. And so there's plenty of time to get practicing before the big lunch or big Jubilee lunch. And I think in the course of my research, I found out that I could grow sunflowers, and I was really surprised to find that you could eat those, and they make excellent microgreens. Who knew? Maybe you did. Perfect for beginners, simple to grow, germination rate's really high, and they taste great as well. So the list of what you can grow is endless. There's something like 50 to 60 varieties that I found. And next slide, please. So obviously we need to think about repurposing and upcycling furniture, and I'd absolutely love to be at this table on a big lunch. It's just as colourful as our community should be, and I think many of us have got some unloved pieces of furniture lying around that we've either inherited or picked up from a charity shop, and maybe have something that could be given a completely new lease of life. You could even check in with your neighbours, maybe friends and family, ask if they've got anything that they'd either like to part with or give a lick of paint just before the big lunch. It'll obviously save things going into landfill, and you can get creative juices going together and turn it into a competition for your big lunch, maybe. Even auction them off as a fundraiser, donate them to a community centre. You could even have a prize for the best throne at your big Jubilee lunch. I've lost count of the amount of times that I've picked up a piece of furniture with the intention of giving it a shabby chic makeover, only to end up putting it back on FreeCycle or pre-loved. You can pick up vintage items very inexpensively there, and or for free, so that's a great thing to do. Next slide, please. And another thing you can do before the big lunch, which is foraging for wild food. That's a great way to get in touch with what's available and for free on your doorstep, and whether that's food, flora or fauna. So rather than growing your own, you could help yourself to what nature has to offer, and you could even make that an activity for your Plant and Share Month get together. I'm sure we've all collected blackberries as children, and this is exactly the same thing, but just requires a little bit of extra knowledge, and just remember to pick in moderation, so you're leaving a bit more for others and wildlife as well. There's dangers, of course, so it's important to learn how to identify which plants, berries and fungi you can pick safely, as many are toxic. But woods and hedgerows, they're all great places for wild food and to connect with the landscape. Foraging is definitely on the increase as well, and there's plenty of books and people and websites that are there to help you and identify that free food. So, and actually the Woodland Trust, they do a month-by-month guide to sustainable foraging, and that explains what's in season and how to eat it. So check that out. And there's so much wild garlic around at the moment, so perhaps get out now and start making some wild garlic pesto. Next slide, please. Next slide, that's great. So neighbourhood nature walks, that's a great big lunch activity to do during your big lunch. So that'll help burn off the cake afterwards, and so that's a win-win situation. So the purpose of this walk really is just to use your senses and notice the natural elements in the neighbourhood where you live, as well as immersing yourself in nature. You know, that has many benefits, as we all know. One being to improve concentration, and I could certainly have done with some of that this week, and I'll be popping a few nature walks into my Outlook calendar, I think. So there's just some of the things to look out for and pay attention to. Things like the sounds you hear, which I recently found out is called cytherism, and that's the sound of breeze through the trees. And just pay attention to things like bark, the texture of stuff, and you know, the very many different shades that you can see in a tree. Notice the clouds, the patterns in the sky. Look under things, lift rocks up if you dare, and look down at the little things growing in the ground, and just find a quiet spot and close your eyes, breathe deeply. Maybe you'll smell that evocative aroma of earth after the rain, and that's known as petrichor. So there's lots of things you can do to be mindful in an activity such as that. And last year I took part in an event by the Woodland Trust, and that was called Feel Good in the Wood. And that was an excellent way of engaging with your local environment and learning a bit more about things like the wood wide web and all those things like cytherism and the sound of whispering to the trees. So that's the next slide, please. Thank you, Laurie. So during your big lunch, seed swaps are also a great way to create connection, as you can literally grow together as a community through sharing that process from flower to fruit. I actually had a bit of a seed swap in my own big lunch, which was with a few neighbours in the street, and that was using leftover seeds from a community project I created during lockdown when I distributed pollinator packs around my local park for people to find and take home. I also created a social media account for that project, just so people could get in touch and share the joy of finding them with me and each other, how it made them feel, what they went on to do afterwards, which was really lovely to hear. Some even passed them on to friends who were going through a tough time to raise a smile, which was exactly my intention. So it was really lovely to see a neighbour's daughter getting down on the ground and planting up a yogurt pot, even if a technique wasn't quite right, but it's just about the act. So it's lovely to see people participating in things like that. And next slide, please. So another thing you can do during your big lunch. So this brings us nicely on to potting stations, where you can take things a bit further and maybe share your experience with other less green-fingered folk, and just let them enjoy the gift of growing as well, and all that brings with it, which can really help strengthen your community connection and further bring real and lasting pleasure. Next slide, please. So one of the things that also came about as a result of my big lunch was discussing the wildlife we'd seen in our own gardens throughout lockdown, particularly, and through participating in programs like 30 Days Wild with the Wildlife Trust throughout June, which also helped strengthen the connections with creatures in our communities as well. So you might know the hedgehogs are endangered, and I was super excited to come across hedgehogs one night when I popped out and locked my shed. And from that, I went on to create a hedgehog feeding station just to encourage their presence, and soon had 2 hedgehogs visiting. So My neighbours and I discussed having a hedgehog highway, which was basically a CD-sized hole in a fence on both sides of your garden. So, but don't forget, if you've got a pond, just to put a ramp in there to allow hedgehogs access or exit out of the pond. So, and next slide, please. And also, as we know, as a result of the big lunch, we get to know people a little bit better. We often find out that there is a wealth of talent on our doorstep, which with a variety of skills that we can draw from. So rather than giving gifts that impact the environment negatively through packaging, perhaps we can give a gift of our time to a neighbour in need, maybe even auction off a skill to raise money for a local cause on the day. That's a lovely thing to do. Next slide, please. So growing kitchen scraps is another thing that we can do following our big lunch. And I know this is literally scraping the bottom of the bin, but rather than sending kitchen scraps off to landfill or putting them in a compost bin, you could try regrowing them. Certain fruits, herbs, vegetables will successfully root and happily grow in containers on a sunny windowsill. I've grown an avocado houseplant quite easily from inserting 4 cocktail sticks around the stone and then just suspending that in water and planting it up and allowing that to shoot. Not only can this activity save you money, but you can cut down on food waste. It's great for teaching kids or adults valuable lessons about nature and sustainability. So from celery and onions to beetroot, carrot tops, scraps have often got plenty of life left in them still. So, but you can also regrow from seed, of course, and collect that. You might have bought basil plants from your supermarket, which are usually grown in pretty poor soil, so often don't last too long once home. You could snip sprigs of that off and let those root in water, pop them up in quality compost and maybe share those with a neighbour. Next slide, please. I love improvising with stuff that's lying around the house. So this is all about reusing what we've got, especially if it's free. And I did a lot of that during lockdown when we couldn't just pop out to a garden centre. So I always think before I throw, and these oat milk containers are a classic example. For one, that they're planet friendly, but 2, they are ready-made alternatives to plant pots. Same goes for any plastic bottles that you may have, which can make great cloches for hardening off your plants. And just avoid single use in gardens because that can break down. Plastic fruit punnets, full takeaway containers, ready meal trays, they're all perfect as propagators and seed trays. So you could even use those to grow your microgreens in for the big lunch or your plant and share month. The only problem I've had with letting people know about what I'm doing is that I very quickly seem to get inundated with everybody else's recycling. So that's just something to be aware of. And next slide, please. So obviously taking inspiration from the Queen's Green Canopy during the Jubilee year, one of the simplest ways to improve air quality in your neighbourhood is to plant a tree or even a hedge or a green roof. So they're all proven to significantly reduce air pollution, and planting trees is actually a really great intergenerational activity and legacy project for your community's future. The best time to actually plant the trees is October to April, so they can establish before the ground gets too dry. So single trees in urban areas have been found to be far more beneficial at collecting harmful particles than those in a woodland area. Likewise, hedges in urban areas absorb particles and vehicle exhaust fumes from plants and provide homes for birds and insects and animals. You could plant beech, hawthorn, holly, or if you plant blackthorn, you've got the added benefit of sloes, which are perfect for making gin. Could happily do a session on gin myself. A green roof in an urban environment, that also helps filter out airborne particles and pollutants and reduce noise pollution. And in winter, a green roof will insulate against heat loss. And during summer, it will retain cool air. So they're usually planted up with low maintenance sedums, succulents, herbs, wildflowers and grasses, but you could also grow salad crops and strawberries. And they're a great way of attracting pollinating insects into your garden as well. But if you cannot install a green roof on your house, then sheds, garages, garden buildings, they're all great alternatives. things like log stores, wheelie bins, bike stores, bug hotels. I've got one on my bug hotel. And next slide, please. So another thing to do after the big lunch, which is great, just share the best things about your neighbourhood and foster that sense of local pride with your fellow residents. So get your local community to share their favourite places and encourage people to look at where they live with fresh eyes and have a Love Where You Live week. All you need for that is just some tags to tag those special places with so other people can find them. And then you could just use luggage labels, a piece of ribbon, anything, so as long as it can be removed afterwards without any damage. So you just need a bit of advertising for that place to distribute the tags, or put them in an envelope for people with instructions to post them through neighbours' doors maybe. Put a few sample tags up just to get things going. It could be on a tree, a piece of street art, a place where the light falls at a certain time of day, a place where kids like to hang out, or just an old wall. And that's sometimes just enough to get people engaged with where they live. So that's a great thing to do. Next slide, please. So planting an unloved plot of land. So the rebel in me, the rebel with a cause in me, loves a bit of guerrilla gardening. And this is essentially the act of gardening on neglected land that you don't necessarily have the legal right to use, such as an abandoned public site or private property. But it could also be an unloved planter or an overgrown flower bed, even a roundabout or underpass. And some people just want to grow flowers and food crops to make the area more attractive, whilst others can use it as a form of protest. Or we can just do it to make people smile, like on this photo with the crack in a pavement, which is lovely, with the doll's house bench on there. It's technically trespass, but if you want the project to be lasting, then maybe ask your local council if you can cultivate it and potentially start a community garden. And next slide, please. So long term, as Lo's already touched on this, but you could set up a library of things for a repair cafe with neighbours or your community, as Lo's mentioned earlier, and borrow for your event. There's lots of us through the pandemic ended up informally sharing and borrowing things from our neighbours. So why not make that a proper local resource and make a list of what people can lend to each other, and as a library of things. Tools and gardening equipment work really well as people buy them, and they're not used as much. So make the most of those and borrow rather than buy new. And similarly, you could work out who has different skills, as I've touched on, and you might find that a neighbour who's a dab hand at a sewing machine, or a keen carpenter, and somebody who likes tinkering with electricals. You could make a list of people in your neighbourhood who could repair different things and locally save throwing things away. And that completes my section. So thank you very much.
Cool, thank you so much, Darren. I'm gonna make sure I can see everybody again now, so I'm not sharing slides again. So I'm conscious that we have very swiftly got to 1:30 and we said we'd only be here for an hour. So if anybody needs to run off, that is fine. But if not, if anybody has any, I've seen loads of ideas being shared in the chat already. So I'll make sure to share those as a follow-up. But if anyone's got any other suggestions of things they've done or would like to share, or any burning questions, do share them now with us. Cool. Yes, people are sharing clothes and plant swaps. Yeah, clothes swaps at an event is a really nice idea. I know a few people who've done those, and plant swaps as well. I guess Darren mentioned seed swapping, plant swapping. You've already done the hard work, haven't you? You've already started it.
Yeah.
We always have a little raffle with people's unwanted gifts. Everybody always has unwanted presents for Christmas and birthdays and things. So we have a raffle to redistribute those.
I like that. That's a really nice idea. So one man's trash is another man's treasure and all that.
Yeah.
Really nice. Cool. I think as well, there's one point about that we sort of haven't touched on. The fact that you're thinking about this already, it's like you're doing a good thing. Like, one, community events are brilliant, but two, the fact that you're thinking, how can I do them in a sustainable, planet-friendly way? The fact that you joined this call is really great, because I think there's something around, like, people are always really, I don't know, me personally, I feel like I'm guilty for whatever I do. I feel guilty about anything I do because I know that there's an impact, the planet impact. So I think there's something about knowing that actually there's also a positive impact to the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, and there's anything small is going to make a difference, isn't it? And I think there's quite a few examples there to get our teeth into and contribute to the planet. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the conversation.
Okay, great. Well, I am conscious that we did run over, so I won't keep anybody for longer unless anybody has anything else they want to share. Yes, thank you, Kit, for the reminder. We will save the chat and share some links that people have been sharing. But yeah, good reminder for me. And just to say, so this is part of a series of events we're doing at lunchtimes to help people with their events planning, especially around the big lunch, but it fits for other events. So the next one we'll be running will be, I think it's the next one. We might have another one in between somewhere about fundraising. So if you're interested in doing a community event and actually you want to learn a bit more about how you can make some money out of the community event, I mentioned at the start of the call that, yeah, people raise millions of pounds across the UK during the big lunch. So that's happening on Wednesday in 2 weeks' time on the 11th of May. And again, I will share that in the follow-up link.
Yes, please. Sorry, Laurie, I'm going to be helping Laurie deliver that session. So please sign up. Try to get as many people to sign up as possible. And you're right, Laurie, it's the 11th of May from 12:30 to 1:30.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Thank you, Martin.
I've had a lot of people asking me about fundraising recently, so I'm signposting them towards that one.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, and I think, and just to say, I mentioned it before, we will be sharing one link with everything in it to make life easier. It's called a Padlet. It will be like a notice board. And if you have any problems with that, do let us know as well. But otherwise, I think that's all we have to share for now. Thank you so much for giving us your lunch times and joining us, and for sharing into the chat. It's been really great to see everyone's ideas coming through. And have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.